Well, it's really not a surprise anymore considering how good Georgia's been over these last few years. But then you read it in some of the preseason magazines when you see an assistant coach go on the record anonymously, which which happens a lot. It's not abnormal in my experience. But Georgia is viewed very much so the way that I think Florida State in the 90s, maybe the Gators in the 90s, Alabama most recently. I would say more akin to the teams in the 90s, but they are viewed as the best program in college football. Their biggest, I talk about this all the time. Their biggest fight is probably going to be with Ohio State. Here's a quote from one of the preseason magazines, an anonymous quote from a an assistant coach saying, "With Nick Saban gone, with Nick Saban retired, this Georgia's the best program overall program in college football right now. If the current Ohio State staff had a national title, you might make an argument, but entering 2024, Georgia is the standard. If you're looking for a fault, it might be that all of Carson Beck's receivers options and at tight end are gone." But the a coach goes on to say that Georgia's brought a bunch of people in, which they have. But I would focus on, to me at least, the biggest thing in all of this is, you know, I just don't think there's much doubt about it being the best program in the country. And when I talk with assistants privately, not always about that, but they're always kind of wondering what's going on at Georgia. Who are they bringing in on recruiting visits? How are things administratively? But they already know the answers. Really, they already know how good Georgia is and where this program is probably headed. Alabama under Nick Saban may have been the best athletic organization in collegiate sports, perhaps with the exception of the Oklahoma softball team. It was always there. It was in their blood. They won. They got institutional buy-in. That's all gone now. The institutional buy-in is not gone, but Nick's gone, and a lot of the DNA that was there is going to slowly go away and change over time. It's up to Kalen DeBoer and that staff to make sure that they're still winning on their terms. I don't know. That's going to be the hardest part. Is can they figure out how to win the way that they want to win? Georgia doesn't have that problem. Georgia is in the position where they've got the head coach they've always had. They're returning the starting quarterback. You're starting you're starting a lot of people on the offensive line who have started, in national championship games. Tate Ratledge. You've got Truss. It's a bunch of guys. Arian Smith. These Stackhouse, Brinson. I mean, Broderick Robinson's, Branson Robinson has scored a touchdown in a national championship game. This is a team that is used to and understands their position. Now, I don't know if that doesn't guarantee anything. I know that doesn't guarantee anything. I think the question is, what happens if Georgia loses a game? What happens in the 2024 season? I think it totally depends when you lose the game. Do you lose against Alabama on the road? Do you lose Ole Miss on the road? Do you lose to Texas on the road? Do you use the opener to Clemson? Do you lose it at Kentucky? Do you lose to Tennessee at home? Do you lose to Auburn at home? Georgia Tech upsets you, something like that. You lose in the SEC championship game. I don't think any one loss ends this season. Any one loss does not change who the best program is. Alabama's not the best program in the country. Now that bothers a lot of Alabama fans. And I don't care. That's their problem. Their head is in the sand. That's no longer the best program in the country, and it's not because Nick left. It's because Georgia passed them. They just did. That I'm trying to think. That Georgia beat Florida in 1997 didn't mean that Georgia was a better program than Florida. They just beat them that day. Alabama beat Georgia in Atlanta. Okay, that doesn't make them the better program. I'm trying to think. South Carolina in 2019, Alabama in 2021. So, at that time in 2021, it was a different conversation. I'm not sure we can say that now. In fact, we can't. I think the two programs at the top of the list are Georgia and Ohio State. This assistant coach is making the argument that it's Georgia, and I think I don't see how you can see it any other way. In the grand scheme of things, these are the top 5 programs from my perspective. In no order, but I'll try to keep it in order to some degree. Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, and probably Texas. Well, the problem with 2 of those, when you start talking about Alabama, their head coach left. Michigan, their head coach left. Georgia, their head coach is still there. He's got 2 national championships. Ohio State, their head coach is still there. He's played in 2 national championship games. He's played in 1. I misspoke. It may have well been the national championship game in Atlanta in the Peach Bowl. So, these are not all the same thing. In Texas, of course, with Steve Sarkisian, who's been good at Texas, but I will give this caveat, which is that he's not always been good everywhere he's been. Now, he's had a lot of good, but just like, let me just read these records off because it does matter. 5-7, 7-6, 7-6, 7-6, 8-4. That was all at Washington. That was all at UW. He won 1 bowl game. He finished ranked once the entire time. Okay, at UW. He took that and took over for, I believe, Lane Kiffin, but he took over the SC job. He went 9-4, and then he was fired going 3-2. It didn't look so hot. He went to Alabama soon thereafter. Was at Atlanta, I think. He went to Alabama though for certain, and then he really did Steve Sarkisian is as good an offensive coordinator as we've seen in college football the last sort of decade. Todd Monken was really good. Steve Sarkisian was really good, and at Texas he's gone 5-7, 8-5, and then a very good 12-2 this past season. He is at Texas 11 games over 500. He has not ripped it up as a head coach consistently. He certainly did this last year. So me putting them in there, you very well could make the case that LSU should be number 5, or I'm not listening to discussions of Clemson or Penn State being in the top 5 because they're not. Notre Dame. We're talking about programs, not singular seasons. So I think when you look back at, this is what's going on, and Georgia, when I visited Mike Bobo at Colorado State in 2014 or 15, I can't remember when it was. I think it was 15 in the spring. We were talking about the SEC, and we were just talking about stuff, and of course I didn't imagine he would be in the position that he's in right now. It was possible he could be the head coach of Georgia one day. I didn't think he'd ever be the offense coordinator one day in the future, just because that looked like those days had gone. We were just talking about Alabama though, and he said, that's a machine. In other words, he was basically saying that's not like everybody else. I think Georgia is at that point too. I think the difference between them and say Ohio State is, when Mike said that, Clemson had not had its 4-year run or 5-year run, whatever you want to call it. We had not even come close to that. They were a 9-4, 10-3 program. And maybe that's what they are now. I don't know. But they had not yet challenged Alabama. It looked like Bama had vanquished LSU and all that. It seems to me like Ohio State and Georgia are far closer than what Alabama had to deal with in this past decade, let's say 15 years. But we'll see. I mean, Georgia's not going to just beat Ohio State every time they play them. I don't think. And there's different ways, to lose. I mean, you can not win a national championship by not winning the SEC. That's something as well. And that's exactly what happened this season for the Dawgs. But I think in terms of who is the best, I just don't see how there's really much discussion or confusion about it. Right now, it's Georgia. That can always go away. Why? Because other people can surge too. You tell me who you think is the best down below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.